Welcome to Show Me the Money Rugby League TV. As we saw last week, there was some breaking news that was announced by myself. I'll read word for word what I put on my social media channels, and we're going to have a little bit of a discussion on this news. So I think by now everybody will be cottoning on to what is going to happen next month in March at Wakefield's Bellevue Stadium with the RFL Council meeting. But I got wind of this news a couple of days ago, last week, and I'll read word for word what I've put out, and then I can discuss the email that the clubs have been sent, which is in the public domain. But the breaking news is that the Super League and Championship and League One clubs have officially submitted a resolution aimed at initiating the removal of Simon Johnson, the chairman of the Rugby Football League. Now, this resolution will be presented during the upcoming Rugby Football League Council meeting, which is scheduled for Wednesday, the 12th of March next month at Wakefield's Bellevue Stadium. Now, this decision to pursue for Simon Johnson's ousting comes amid growing tensions between the Super League clubs, the Championship clubs, and the League One clubs, and over the RFL leadership, with clubs expressing concerns over governance issues and the trajectory and direction of where the sport is going. I must stress, when we say clubs, it's not all clubs, but it is a big coalition. And if this resolution is passed, then the Super League clubs, Championship clubs, League One clubs who are rebelling against the Rugby Football League's leadership and direction of where the sport is going, they would see Simon Johnson removed and replaced. And as I've said, this rebellion, normally in the past there's been one or two rebellious clubs, but this does feel different this time from the clubs that I have personally engaged and spoken to over the last few days. There's certainly a lot more calling for this than there have been in the past. So this rebellion against the Rugby Football League does extend far beyond the involvement of just a handful of clubs. It does represent a significant number, a coalition of clubs that are united together in forcing change. So, as I've said, this coalition of clubs, it does have the vast majority of the Super League clubs. We are told 9 will be voting for the removal of Simon Johnson. We're told there is 6 or 7 Championship clubs involved, and 3 or 4 from League One. Together, they are advocating the transformation and the reform of the Rugby Football League, its governance and the direction it is heading. I'll just quickly read out this email, Craig, which has gone to the clubs, which is in the public domain, because trying to explain to fans and supporters who are watching this, what is a resolution, what happens. So obviously there are council meetings every quarter, every 3 months at the Rugby Football League. The clubs, they're the key stakeholders. They have the power in effect. Like, if you were the chairman, Craig, of BP, we're talking the oil company here. So if you're the chairman of BP and, the shareholders, the clubs, they don't see a return from their investment. The price of oil's gone down. You're not massaging the market to get the price of oil back up. Everyone's seeing profits go down. They can effect a council vote, remove you. So this is effectively, in layman terms, what is happening here. Clubs, stakeholders, they're not happy with the people in charge, your Tony Suttons, your Simon Johnsons, and they're looking to put a vote of no confidence in through this resolution and remove those people. So this is effectively what was sent out to everybody in the sport, and it is a Rugby Football League resolution, and I'll read it word for word how it has come from Simon Johnson himself. So,
can I just say before you do this, how have you're allowed to do that? Have you got this in public? This is what?
Yes, this email is everywhere. Yes, other journalists have put it out now. Clubs have put it out. It's everywhere, Craig. So this hasn't been obtained through any illegal means.
But has he not put it out? Who's wrote the email? Are people copied? How would a private email get into public demand?
I don't know, Craig, but Simon has sent this to all the clubs, and then it's out there.
Oh God, that's terrible.
But this is rugby league, Craig. And I would probably say on stuff like this, fans, stakeholders, sponsors probably deserve to know what is happening and what the direction of travel is. I
agree, they deserve to do it. They don't deserve to be read private emails, Mick. I swear to you that. To me, that'd be a massive... if an email, in fact, a confidential email, it says private and confidential. How can that make the public thing that there'd be murders?
Well, like I say, Craig, this is out there and the email doesn't have private and confidential on it. So this is what has gone out to the clubs. So I will read it. So it is hereby resolved that a strategic review of the sport is to be commissioned, and items on this strategic review will include the appointment of an implementation committee in which members and the RFL will be represented. There'll be an appointment of an independent chairman of the implementation committee to be agreed between the Rugby Football League and its member clubs. There will be the implementation committee's findings. So effectively, if they vote to remove the RFL, Simon Johnson, there will be a new committee of members which will include member clubs, Gary Hetherington, Derek Beaumont, and also people from the RFL will be represented. There will be a thorough review, top to bottom, of the sport by this implementation committee, and they will report back to the RFL and the clubs at the next council meeting. As we say, they meet every 3 months. So you've got March, the next one's in July, and that is when this implementation committee of Gary Hetherington, Derek Beaumont, and the RFL, they will report their findings. And as we said, the scope of this strategic review will be agreed by the implementation committee following its appointment. Now, what is interesting in this email is that Simon Johnson has there's a couple of options for clubs here. So Simon has said that he intends to stand down in December. So there's going to be a number of votes here. It's not just a case of we are voting to remove the RFL, to remove Simon Johnson. Simon has I think Simon probably realises, the music in the room has stopped. So Simon has actually put this one in, which would be that the chairman of the Rugby Football League, Simon Johnson, he will step down from office immediately after the December council meeting in 2025. So it's almost like Simon Johnson would stay on for the Ashes and then go anywhere. I'm picking up from the clubs, Craig. Change needs to happen now. Time is of the essence. There's a new broadcast cycle on the horizon, and they want change. So that is the background to it. I don't know if anybody is going to be shocked or surprised with what has happened. I know there's been murmurings for a few weeks now about, clubs unhappy with the direction and the trajectory of the Rugby Football League. We know IMG, there's a lot of fierce criticisms aimed at them. Clearly, something has happened, Craig. Something has happened, because when you're talking in the past, 1 or 2 clubs, maybe 10 at most, but when you've got 9 Super League clubs, the 9 Super League clubs, their votes count as 2, and you've got 7 or 8 from the Championship, and you've got 3 or 4 from League One. A number of clubs have already said to me they won't vote. They will abstain from voting on Wednesday, the March the 12th. That doesn't help Simon Johnson whatsoever, because those that are voting him and the RFL out, that's this basically like opening the gate. Here you go, Derek. Here you go, Gary. I personally think this is the end of the current RFL leadership as we have become to know it. Change is in the air. What that change looks like at this stage, nobody really knows. We know there's going to be an implementation committee. There's Derek Beaumont on that. There's Gary Hetherington. Craig, before we start talking about what might happen, what may happen, what are your thoughts on this? Does this come as a shock to you? I brought this news late last week. I think I was the first person to break it because I was a finger on the pulse. And rightly so, this is massive news. I know a lot of people say, Michael, you engage in the politics of the sport too much. But for me, I think this is far more important than a Jake Truman leaving Club A to Club B, a Jack Wellesby signing a new contract deal. I think this is the bread and butter. This is the whole fabric of the sport, which then facilitates those big transfers. What are your thoughts on it? Are you shocked? Are you sad? Are you surprised?
Well, I'd rather that email had been done on a different one. I'm not into that. That's we'll have to talk about with Sam. I think sometimes you're better off saying this is whatever. That's another thing. I wouldn't like that. Secondly, what would I think about what? No, I'm not surprised at all. I think the sport's been mishandled. And by the way, this is no witch hunt on individuals. Never should be. The RFL's problems and the club's problems have been historic. This isn't about somebody coming into poor old Simon putting a job, and then he got the title, and then everyone viciously goes for him. Oh, it's your fault. Definitely not Simon's fault why we're in the state we are. It's definitely not the other people involved. Tony Sutton, it's none of the staff. Bit by bit, people have left the RFL, Mick, from it being a powerful team 15. When I first come into it, it was a seriously powerful tool. Over the last 7 years, we've lost probably 9, maybe 15 top staff. We've lost 2 or 3 staff to the LTA. Richard Lewis, Karen Moore, everyone before Karen, sorry.
Sally
Bolton.
Yeah.
We've lost good people to top sports and other sports. Ralph's gone to Rugby Union. So there's obviously a problem with the job. It's a poison chalice. So the clubs have got every right. What the clubs got wrong last time is, and this is where they've got to be careful, is the clubs have got to be careful that when they did this last time and they grabbed the power and they put Robert Elston in, they got the wrong person. They put poor old Robert in, had no historic thing on Rugby League, didn't have any drive for the game, no passion. He got brought in as an ex-football man. Brian Barwick did it. They got it all wrong. All the lot were wrong. And then they walked off with a tail between their legs. They've come back now and they've done another. This is the second one. Now, this will be, if the rumours are right and they're saying that this would be looking to put people in charge who've been there before, and they're looking to put him, certain individuals in there for a period of time till they pick this new super squad. I don't know. That's beyond me. That's for their talks. Do I think there's a problem? Of course there is. There has been for 10 or 15 years. Do I think anybody's ever got it right? No. I think it needs strong leadership, and they're going to have to find 1 or 2 people who are that people and then get a team behind it. And somebody's got to take on the clubs, Mick. You've said it for years. If Derek, Degsy, we love Derek. We absolutely love Derek on this show. Degsy's pushing for change. He's pushing for this. He's telling Sky we don't need that. He's telling that. But we're going to have to find somebody who's dare take the clubs on as well. Because if you let the clubs loose, they'll just do what's best for them individually, and it'll become an absolute anarchy. It'll end up at anarchy, because that's what happens. You'll have a Donald Trump situation here where Big Don's bringing Elon in, and you do that, and you do that. I'm not saying it's for right or wrong, but the good thing for the RFL administration, they always look for the good of the sport. They always did what was right for the sport. Did they get it right, wrong? Don't know, opinions. But they did have a thing of not allowing the bigger clubs just to go what's best for them. I think there needs to be change. I think it needs to be out there, the change. And I think that absolutely will be change. All the drums have been beating for months and months and months. Well, the Super League clubs now at the moment are doing their own. Let's be honest, most people are doing their own deals. They're getting 2 or 3 people in commercial departments, CEOs, and they're going out and getting their deal for RFL, and they're getting their deal for RFL. They're going out. But to let Saints and Wigan play that game without the jurisdiction of the full council were unbelievable. When I saw that, I knew it were all over. Because you've just allowed 2 clubs to negotiate their own deal, but keep it within the restraints of the Super League. How have the other clubs allowed that to happen by saying, well, we'll do it. We're going to play hard next week at Amsterdam. We're going to go over to Spain. Oh, I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll have that fixture, and the away club are willing to travel to, Portugal. We're going to have a week in Portugal, Mick. Well, what will happen with that lovely community spirit what you're on about when we start doing that every week? So I'm not altogether there. If that gives the world a taste of Super League, unbelievable. Fly the flag, will all be behind them. That's what historically. But making your own calls within an administration is the most dangerous thing you will ever see in your life. So I reckon Degsy's got the sport at heart, and he don't take prisoners. The old guard of Gary Etherington, who would have had a massive say on all this years ago.
Well, it's an interesting dynamic.
Gary's not there no more. Gary's not that person anymore. He's not that involved. Let's be honest. Tell it as it is and the truth. Gary's not that. I came into this sport where Gary was the number one. And he was the number one at RFL. And he was the number. And you'd sit in an RFL meeting and say, you'd get mentioned the way they do things, the way Leeds did things, the way Gary did things. That's changed, Mick. We've all got that. That's completely changed. So the new power brokers might be the Deggses of this world, because Derek's, and one thing about Derek, he's got record sales, he's got record, things are happening at Lee.
What he's done with Lee, the transformation, the change, the growth.
Yeah.
If Derek coming on this implementation committee brings that to the sport, I'm all for it. I'm sold. I'm sold, Craig.
Yeah.
And I think, I know you've mentioned Robert Elston, but I do go back to that split in 2018. Everybody was saying, yes, this is it. This is the way forward. I remember attending a press conference and, Ian Lenihan is talking about, we're going to take back control and we're going to do this. It was all false words. I can understand the club's frustrations. I really can. For a number of not years, probably months rather than years, but for a long time now, I have got the feeling that people at the RFL haven't been reading the room. They've not been reading the room. They've been asleep at the wheel.
They've got no staff. They've got no income.
We've seen a lot of...
Do you know how many people in the RFL? I don't know what you're on about.
Listen...
There's only... What is the...
Craig, I'm not going after...
Yeah, I'm going to say, it's not individuals. It's not Ian Lenigan, Mick. I'm telling you, it's the way the sport has been run.
But... the Robert Elston split by giving the clubs the power so they can run amok, that was a very, very damning 100%. Key moment in this sport. 100%. At the time, people were saying to me...
Who voted for that, Mick? It wasn't just Ian Lenigan.
It was the Super League clubs.
They pushed it through.
100%. And even
so don't mention names. We can't mention names. No, but
it was the Ian Lenihan master plan. I will put my reputation on the line. Well, it was the Ian Lenihan master plan.
I'm afraid I'm going to challenge you there.
Well, that's fine.
I think that's not a thing. I don't like individual like that. That was a collective vote. And if big men like Super League chairman are swayed by Ian Lenigan, well, then they're not the men I think they are. I meet him on a regular basis. These are all powerful people in their own right. No one could persuade me. No individual in this world could persuade me if I didn't want to do it. So I disagree with you completely. It was a collective thing, and they all did it, and they all had to live with it, and they got it wrong. And then they come back, and then this is happening now. The reason they are picking this up now, Mick, is because it's probably 15 times worse than it ever was. Because I don't believe there's anything there, Mick. I genuinely believe what people from the outside perceive as being this RFL and this, that. It's very disjointed anyway, isn't it? There's this committee, that committee, there's that committee.
Well, you've got the RFL and then you've got RL Commercial. And I know we've been sold realignment, but internally, when you hear from people at the RFL who, give them the due, they'll phone me up and they'll tell me I'll never repeat them on here and betray that trust, but I hear on sometimes a weekly basis horror stories of what they're dealing with and what's gone on. And there is a lack of unprofessionalism in that, but that is because of being asleep at the wheel and ultimately, like you say, allowing good, let's be honest, Sally Bolton, you would have fought tooth and nail to have kept her in Rugby League. She had the successful Rugby League World Cup in 2013. It was no brainer, Craig. After what she delivered, she went to pastures new and she's thriving now. But what I'm saying is, unfortunately, there's some very good people, some very good friends of mine who at the RFL, and I firmly believe they still will have a place moving forward. There's a lot of uncertainty until we have this vote. I think the vote's going to go through. But like you say, Craig, when you look at how the system and the structure currently is, and I know we've been sold the dream of realignment, but you have the RFL there, you've got RL Commercial, which is the Super League clubs, they've all got the golden shares. Ultimately, you've got IMG somewhere in the middle, but there is no power with IMG, there is no power with the RFL, all the power is with the clubs. So one positive of this is if, as part of removing certain people at the RFL, and I know Derek's no IMG fan, whether or not they can get rid of IMG is open to debate. I've heard they can, I've heard they can't, it's legally binding. But if you are going to remove certain individuals, potentially IMG, what fundamentally needs to happen is every one of those clubs, they need to relinquish those golden shares, that power to this brand new implementation committee, and that new central committee needs to call the shots. It needs robust, transparent, honest leadership, full of integrity, full of drive, full of vigour, full of growth, I dare say full of piss and vinegar, somebody who's a go-getter, somebody who is going to rescue this sport. Because at the minute, we're there, we're stalling, we've used that analogy of the cruise ship, we've gone from the warm temperate waters of Tahiti, we're full steam ahead into the icebergs. And I think that is why Derek, Gary and those other 7 Super League clubs and the 7 or 8 Championship and the 3 or 4 from League One, that they've simply had enough. That they've had enough of weak, rudderless leadership, yes men, Peter principled men who, unfortunately, are not delivering for the member clubs. That is my interpretation of it. That is what I'm feeling from the clubs that I'm speaking to.
I think the clubs are full of, I don't understand how some of the clubs can say this when they voted people in. They've gone along with this. Who is that person you're describing? He will not come to our sport. Let me tell you now, that person you're describing is no one is capable of doing that sport. No, they're not. They're not. And if they did have that person, I promise you'd have a lot to lose personally because of how you're then put in here. If you've got people like Eddie Hearn running scared of this game, believe me now, mate, the person to come and galvanise this sport, who has got a clean reputation, who has got everything right and integrity and that and this, and then the drive to take on all the clubs and take the clubs with them, and the drive then to keep the grassroots game absolutely on the top, and then the international game. I don't think there is that person around. Honestly, Mick, because they wouldn't come to our sport. I swear to you, they wouldn't. If that administrator were that good, he wouldn't arrive at rugby league's doors. Unfortunately, there's better sports than us, Mick. I'm sad to say that.
I tend to agree.
If you've got my mate's recruitment agency, he goes, right, I've got one. I've got a super kid. He's 38. He's got this. He's got that. He's had all the experience. If he got given 60 CVs to go for a job, he wouldn't choose rugby league, Mick. He'd be last. He just won't choose it. So what they'll do is, and you're saying, I want somebody with integrity, and I want... Who? I don't know anybody I know in this sport. I tell you what, I'll be honest, 10 years ago, Gary Etherington should have been given the keys to the city. I think Gary, and people have got their own opinions on Gary, but I can tell you how I dealt with Gary. Hard, tough, always wanted it his way, but loved the game. Managed to, only person in history to take a Sheffield club and sell for money, and then did what he's done at Leeds, changed the franchise into one of the greatest franchises in the world. He'd be the CV that I'd look at, but Gary is not that. Gary wouldn't have that no more. I'm afraid, mate, we're talking about saying it's an if that can't be filled, my friend, unfortunately. The job won't pay enough.
You follow a lot of sports. You're not going to get anybody from UFC. Is there anybody, Craig, outside of rugby league? A lot of people are saying to me it should be somebody from outside of the sport. Somebody new, fresh, a visionary.
Opposite.
You're not seeing that? You're not seeing that?
No chance. You cannot have another person from outside the sport. You've got to be able to understand this sport thoroughly. Absolutely thoroughly. You've got to have the trust of all the people in charge. So you've got to have trust, integrity, knowledge of the sport, at least 5 years, in my opinion, where you've been involved in it in some aspect. And you know it, you understand it, and I think unless you've got them credentials, and then you've got to have I would say a CV of changing things. Have I took a company and I've produced this? Have I took this and produced this? Do I understand all the aspects of being a success at that level? How do you get a 60-year-old person now to come in and say, I'm going to revolutionise rugby league in marketing? That 60-year-old person historically would have been brought up with a different type of marketing. So it's going to be somebody who's gone with the times as well. Do you get me? If he's 50, 40. So it's and you don't want a young lad in this that chew him up. There's too many powerful people that just chew him up. So this person, I would say, out of 1 million people put the CVs, and if they did, they won't be less than 20. I think they'll go, roll out the barrel, they'll just bring somebody out again. They'll just do the same thing what they always do. There'll be somebody they have in mind, they'll shove him forward, and that's what they'll do. That's my opinion. The person you're on about, which you describe passionately to the viewers,
doesn't exist.
No chance. Not a chance. People who everyone's going to back up, and the fans are going to get behind, they're going to be galvanised by somebody like Peter Vlandy-Job. Who? It's let's be honest, it's like, we can talk all you want. Maybe if, I can't even think now who'll get things done and keep the respect of everybody.
Well, Craig, there's a lot of people commenting, and please, if you are watching live, please put in the comments who you feel could be this figure, this person, man, woman, who could come into the sport of rugby league on this implementation committee alongside Derek Beaumont and Gary Hetherington, and lead this review and ultimately decide, for the sake of rugby league and where it's heading, some positivity, some growth, an upward trajectory, increase the Sky TV deal, increase the participation numbers, look at what's happening at grassroots. I live in the city of Bradford, and we've mentioned this before on the show, Craig. There used to be the Bradford Cup, and there was 11, 12 community clubs, and they'd used to have a draw. Now, because there's only really Clayton, Queensbury, Wyke, they start with the semi-finals. This is what I'm saying. It's been,
Mick, we've said this.
It's been an overall decline over a number of years.
And this is what I'm trying to say to you, and I want you to get this into your head. There is no individual to blame for this. It's a collective. Over the last 15 years, it's a collective view of the world of sport that's took a downwards. A lot of sports have took a downward spiral, so it's not just rugby league. We've had a lot of change in what we said about the staff. We've had a lot of Sky are not as powerful as they were when we first had Sky. There was a thing we talked about the sticks. The sticks are having a fundamental, absolute nightmare on. They were saying the other day, because we're working class areas who watch rugby league, that we're more prone to get sticks than somebody who's living in the affluent areas.
Sky's profits in sport are down for the first time ever.
So that'll have a reflection of our deal. But bottom line is, and I'll say it again, no individual should be to blame for this. It's a collective, and all of us who are key holders in the sport need to get better, and the sport has to be better run at the top. Your question you were saying before is runners and riders. So let's say poor old Simon, who they brought in and then they've ousted as though he's done. Let me finish. As though he's done everything wrong. No, he's done nothing wrong. He's probably. Carl Hall's my friend. Carl Hall tells me that man's a gentleman. I trust Carl.
I totally agree. I did the Rob Burrow walk with Simon. A great individual
that's what I'm saying.
Who has come across the clubs having the power.
Yeah, and they've come across
the clubs ruling the roost.
And now they're making out they're getting rid of somebody who's not really had any power anyway. Let's be honest.
Yes, correct.
So then you've got your other power brokers within the sport who've left by one. So if then they bring somebody in, they say, right, Simon, thank you for what you've done for the sport. You've been a great custodian. He deserves no negatives on anybody. And then we say, who's the runners and riders? So does it come from within the clubs, mate? Do the clubs appoint somebody from within their reign? Who would they say is champion as their man? Would they go for a Carl Fitzpatrick? Some would.
My personal thoughts on Carl, he has that ability in terms of marketing, like when he got Wolfie at the Crucible and then that went viral.
Yeah.
Recently,
new vision.
Recently, renaming the Halliwell Jones the Luke Littner Stadium, and that's gone viral.
Yeah. So Carl can reach headlines.
Carl is probably somebody. You probably, with the greatest respect to Carl, and we had a laugh last week at the Super League Lodge, me and Fitzy, you probably won't have him up there as number one, but if this is going to be club led, like Derek and Gary are saying, there would be a place for Carl Fitzpatrick in terms of the media and the market.
So if they don't go outside and I would never do that again after Robert, I would never bring somebody in.
So you're saying we need to look inside?
Roger Draper, I think we've done it before. It has to be somebody within.
Well, we all remember what happened with Brian Barwick. Well, absolutely terrible.
For me, it needs to be somebody who's got a key interest in the sport.
By the way, Brian, if you are watching and you still got your black book, we're still waiting for these deals and contacts.
That's another jibe. Have we got?
Sorry.
So you look at now. They've all. Remember, this is respectfully so. Everybody who's in rugby league, like Carl, Paul Aiken, who was revolutionised WKR, probably done one of the best jobs on a turnaround in 4 years I've ever seen. He'd be right up there from people. Some people would be off Paul because they'll say, oh, blah, blah, they always blame. He's done it because he's got the backer of money, he's done this. He hasn't. He's done it because he's fantastic at getting things done. I'd say Paul's one of the best I've ever seen, and I'm about away from sport.
Yes.
At getting things done.
Competent.
He just does not allow any... Yeah. No, he just gets it done. He'll just keep at you. He'll just put you on spot and he'll say, right, and so that'd be great within our sport. Them fundamentals. Why would Paul leave a great job at KR on the money he'll be on to take all this shit and stress?
Well, I think that's doubtful.
Yeah. So then you're looking through at your other runners and riders. So you've got Degsy. Why would Degsy give up Lee? And a fantastic one at growing business when he does himself, personal multimillionaire, flies all around the world, been one of the greatest characters in sports ever seen. Gets the job done, Degsy. Gets the job done. But Degsy would upset a lot of people if they put Degs, and if he said to Lee, "I'm going to leave you there. It's all running smooth, and I want to run rugby league." You know, I'd follow Derek. I'd have a go with him. But Derek's way of doing things is a very individual based. I've run a business where I was the man. I had 1,800 staff, and you're walking round, and everything you say is gospel, and every idea you have is yours. I never went, you're not about that. That's what Degsy's league, that what probably won't work in rugby league. There's too many big characters who would be upset by that type of leadership. So then you go through your riders. You mentioned there's a few, Nigel Wood, and there's rumours saying, would Nigel come back and be a custodian? I'll give you pluses for Nigel very quickly. Nigel Wood, when I was lucky enough to be at Doncaster when Nigel was in the sport, what did I see about Nigel in that time? I don't know how he did it. I'd call him the wizard, but he had a way of getting you to vote for a certain way which he thought was for the benefit of the sport. People might say the benefit of himself. It wasn't. It was the benefit of the sport. Fact. He could get a lot of people in the room and you'd walk out and you'd suddenly go one way and you'd realise Nigel had done it. These are big characters, but somehow you'd all gone a certain way. You'd have to say the sport was in the best position of ever under the Super League when Nigel was the custodian of the sport. On the negative side, Nigel is involved at Bradford. That'd be a massive conflict of interest. He'd have to resign from that, for me. Secondly, he didn't leave in the best of manners. He got dropped, he got the big payout. You know what the fans will say. There'd be some absolute pearlers coming every way that you've ever seen. His knowledge of the sport is number one. No doubt. Every area, if you put one person into a box and you said that box, who's got the best overall knowledge of rugby league, N Wood wins. But he's done a lot of damage to his legacy from how he left and how people perceived how he left. Now, Nigel could argue, he'd come and sit here and say, "What are you about, Craig? What are you about?" And he'd probably beat me in a debate. 10 out of 10. I'm quite honest with the debate. I just say what I think and that's it. You're going to take me. And Nigel would have a way of beating me 15 times over saying, "I don't understand that." He's done a fantastic job at Bradford. They look like they're on the way back if they've got these new investors in. It looks like he's turned the club round in 3 years. So if you wanted somebody to turn it round and get us back on this, would you trust Nigel with it? I'll be honest with you, I probably would. But the baggage that will come and the day-to-day fans would not trust Nigel. He'd have to do a campaign better than Donald Trump's. Do you know what I mean? He'd have to do something here. And he'd probably have to have every other person in rugby league to back him publicly for the fans and them clubs to back it. Do you understand what I'm saying there?
Yeah.
Derek goes, back this man, Lee'll buy him. They love Degsy.
Gary Everington.
Simon Morano, Fitzy comes out, bump. Mike Rush, bump.
Even Eamon McManus is backing.
I'm saying if that
Derek
is, then the fans would then say yes. There would still be a 25% of the fans would not have anything to do with it. And does the sport need that now? Does they need that type of absolute collision cause what that'd cause? Because it would. You can put your Bradford hat on and you say you don't, but you could. And you could say, "Oh yeah,
if I'm going to put my Bradford hat on, Craig, and you use Paul Larkin at Hulkingston Rovers, why would Paul go from what he's building at Hulkingston Rovers into this mess? It is going to be a rugby league sort of civil war. You have a vast majority of clubs who, again, nothing personal against Tony Sutton or Simon Johnson, but they're fed up, they're not happy. They want to call the shots and bring their own.
They've been underfunded themselves, haven't they?
And I think the key was when Derek made a point. He says for the first time ever, he's getting 1.2 from the broadcast money, and he's actually putting more than 1.2 in. So I can understand where the sport is, but in terms of Nigel, look, he's worked incredibly hard over the last 4 years turning around Bradford. Blood, sweat, tears. Nigel, Jason Hurst. They've gone from that very sort of small, committed group. Mark Sawyer obviously was involved, Adam Fogarty. They've gone from that to what they've got now, which is local businessmen. and entrepreneurs and people with money and finance who can all come together as a collective. I've not been able to speak to Nigel. I've not been able to track him down since obviously this all broke down. But I kind of strongly... People have been asking me about this Nigel Wood connection, and I've been looking at it, and I'm looking at it logically. Nigel's goal was always to bring Bradford Bulls from Dewsbury back to Bradford. He achieved that. The goal since then was Super League. I just couldn't see Nigel leaving Bradford for this and the shit show. What is going to happen, because I spoke to one League One club yesterday, I won't name them, but they actually said, this is absolutely the worst thing this club, the sport needs. They're saying, this is the worst thing the sport needs. I'm writing checks for 20 grand a month to keep my League One club going, and this is the worst thing the sport needs. But then he realises the Super League clubs call the shot. He had obviously done his due diligence like me, ringing around which way you're going to vote. And he realises you've got 9 that are voting against. That's already duplicated to 18 votes. Plus, you've got your Batleys, your Bradfords, your Dewsburys, your Featherstones, your Widnesses. Apparently, Clint at York is still with the RFL, as are a couple of other clubs. But because you have that weight at the Super League who are fed up and want change, this will go through. So he feels obliged to vote with it and go with the flow. It's better to be with the runner and riders than against. But
I get you.
Craig, I just couldn't see Nigel leaving Bradford for what he's trying to do, which is hopefully Bradford back in the Super League in 26.
And the same goes for Clint at York. Why would Clint want to leave what he's doing? Why would Chris Ravlinsky want to leave? Probably the best.
You summed it up.
Best job in the UK.
You summed it up, Craig. It's a poison chair. Poison chair.
So your problem is you could go around all the clubs and all the CEOs, and I do believe it has to be somebody from within the sport. I'm massive on that. It has to be because of the history of the sport. But that person's got to have that much drive to get us where we are now and start making quick calls. And he's got to unite every single person, which is hard. Amateur clubs, fans. Do you know what I mean? Top level boys, big investors, top sponsorships, Betfred. Everyone's got to buy into this to get it. So as I said, I'll repeat it again. Is that person here who will all follow through the water? You know, is it? Do you go for a Jamie Peacock type? You know, who wouldn't have the business ethics, Kevin Sinfield, who wouldn't put who the people would follow through everything. Can you imagine Kevin Sinfield saying, I'll come back and do this, and I'm going to put a team behind me to say...
Well, that's what Gary and Derek are saying.
They'd follow Kevin.
They're saying it'd be a team.
They'd follow Kevin through the...
I would love Kevin, and I'd hope they'd be speaking to Kevin or getting someone like Kevin on board on this implementation committee.
Yeah.
What Derek and Gary are calling the implementation committee. Effectively the new version of the RFL, which will do a review and come back, report findings and changes.
I just think it's very hard. I think IMG have done some fantastic things in the last 12 months. I do. Starting to actually believe behind the counter. I don't know the money that they've been paid. I'm not if I agree with that. I think the deal they come on should have been the deal they stuck on. So them getting paid and asking for more, if that's true, I don't know if it's true. So I don't really know.
We can only report what the clubs are saying.
Yeah, is what. But if they can find this man, Mick, through the needle in the haystack, they're better men than me. And if I get asked about it, I'd say exactly what I've said today, that the person or the people you'll get needs to be that one person who everybody will follow. And you've got to be able to take on you've got to be a boxer who can take on the heavyweight champion of the world and then take on the flyweight champion of the world. Do you get me? Yeah. You've got to fight UFC and boxing and wrestling. You've got to be able to do this man's got, or lady has got to be that fantastic and that inherent in the job. Do you get me? That it would be absolutely, and they've got to just have an historic knowledge of it. So I think it's the impossible task. Can somebody come in, do it temporary till they find this person? Yes, 100%. I can think of 3 or 4 people who could do that temporary till you find that person. And if the right people are looking for that person, hopefully he comes along. I'd be very... do you know, if you put somebody who hasn't got that conviction, what you'll get the public doing is saying, well, everybody wants their own man in. Do you get me? Do you understand politics when they got Donald Trump in America? Do you understand what he did?
I am big on...
Do you know what he got? Let me finish that. What he got? He got Elon Musk, who he was genius what he did. He got...
Yeah, you've got the biggest one of the social media platforms constantly on your side. You could not, you know...
He's managed... How Donald got from beginning to get arrested for what happened on that date, when the siege happened on the thing, and then all of a sudden he's come back round and won it. It's because of what he did was very clever. He strategically put Dana White, the straightest sports promoter in the world, the biggest following in the world now, UFC.
He had Joe Rogan on his side.
You know it, the biggest podcast. And he went and he went on these young podcasts with these young lads. Donald Trump with it, because Dana was saying to him, if you go onto this podcast, they get 25 million people. Now, whoever's going to do this needs to do that. Probably needs to do 10 podcasts in Rugby League. He needs to do all BBC, go round and campaign, and he needs all the people round him. The power brokers in the sport need to back him. Who do people listen to in this sport? Get top 6 they listen to, and they'd have to back this person. Do you get me? Like Trump, you'd have to back that person.
Well, thank you very much for joining us. Obviously, we have done this a few weeks ahead of this big vote, which will take place on Wednesday, the 12th of March. I've already booked my train tickets to be outside the ground at Wakefield on Wednesday, March the 12th. We know a lot of club owners, a lot of officials in the sport watch this. That is D-Day. That's me in the car park at Salford in 2018, having my heart broken when I realised the Super League clubs had voted to come away from the RFL and bring in Robert Elston. I knew that was never going to work. And, you know, hopefully what happens at Wakefield on Wednesday, the 12th of March, I think this could be a real opportunity to, you know, reverse those mistakes and heal those wounds. But as Craig says, whoever joins that implementation committee as interim chairman of the sport of Rugby League, oh boy, I wish them every success in dragging this sport and turning it around and bringing us positive growth, because without Rugby League, what have we got in life? We've got very little. Thank you for joining us. We'll be back next week.